protein sources do you see in your dog's food? Now, if I can get back to the right screen, I think we'll be good to go. Technology. So, I posted these two pictures the other day and said, how many carbohydrates do you think are in this bag of food? And how many sources of protein and carbs do you see? So we're going to cover the answer to that quickly, and then in a separate video, we'll come back later and talk more about reading your dog's food label. But let's start with the guaranteed analysis. It's on every bag. It's on every can. Though cans, you're going to have to do a little bit more math. Another conversation. Dry dog food is what we're talking about here. Crude protein, crude fat, crude fiber. Crude means not yet processed, not yet refined, not yet cooked in our case. And the amount of protein that is in the recipe or this food source prior to all the processing that it will go through. So this is a minimum amount. And this protein source, for example, is not your first ingredient. It is all of the protein sources that we find in the recipe. When we look at these 4 items and add them together, you will notice that they do not add up to 100%. So what's the difference? The difference is the carbohydrates. At least a good rough estimate of the amount of carbohydrates that will be found in this food. So in this case, when we add up all of these ingredients or all of these items, we wind up with 61%. Subtract that number from 100, and this recipe will have about 39% carbohydrate. I have seen carbohydrate counts as high as 50 to 60% in some foods, which is far, far, far too much, right? Important for you to note that we are looking at a puppy food here, and that may be why you're seeing a higher percentage of protein. Puppies tend to get more protein in puppy development. That's a different conversation, but we are looking at a puppy food with about 39% carbohydrate. So if you're in that range of 40, 50 plus % carbohydrate, think about a puppy that might feel like a kid who's had too much candy. And perhaps they are bouncing off the walls, or they are over adrenalized, or they're over aroused. And we may need to consider the carbohydrates that are actually being put into the diet. We also know that carbohydrates can be a factor in creating inflammation in the body. And it can be a contributing factor to diseases long term and allergies and things of that nature. But protein can be a source of an allergen as well. Proteins can also be a source of behavioral issues and how the body feels, how the body responds if we have an intolerance to a protein, or those proteins might be creating heat in the body, as is related or discussed in what we call 5-element theory through Chinese medicine. Or the opposite, one that is creating coolness, bringing the temperature, and I don't mean the physical temperature, I mean sort of this internal combustion thing, and keeping a dog way too cool. Those might be dogs that are always trying to warm themselves up in some way, or maybe just not as active as we think they should be. For a puppy or a young dog of their age, that maybe they are, again, sort of in this quiet, relaxed, sedative, almost sedate state, when in fact they should be full of energy. We may be creating too much coolness in the body, or the body may be too cool and we need to warm it up through food. So there's a variety of ways to have this discussion and talk more about that. So 39% carbohydrate is our estimate in this bag. We will discuss canned food later. I asked you, how many sources of protein do you see? And this is an important thing for you to start to understand. It is not the first ingredient on the bag. Marketing says that we have to list ingredients in the order of the volume of that ingredient in the recipe. So they are in order of how much is present. But you have to then consider what happens when we add up all the other sources. You may find that you are getting far more plant protein than you are the first single ingredient. That's an important thing to keep in mind, okay? So in this case, we see beef, pork, meat, meal, peas, lentils, chickpeas, dried egg, moving on around, pork, liver, cheese, and lamb. All of those are at least a portion of your protein sources. So that's at least 9 contributing ingredients to the total protein. Okay? Peas, lentils, chickpeas are all coming from a plant-based resource. This is how a lot of vegetarians and vegans get their protein sources, is from these types of foods. So beef is a great ingredient. It's one of those neutral ingredients, but it may not be the largest, it may not be the primary protein source when combined with all the rest of the ingredients, right? Because we don't know if this is, and I'm just going to throw out a number, we don't know if this is 25% and this is 23 and 22. We don't know, right? So it's important to understand that you still got to look at the aggregate of putting all these pieces together. When we see something called meat meal, and Christy asked about that in her response the other day, meat meal is not muscle meat. Meat meal is a lot of what is left over after processing. We often find that in the byproduct category. And so meat meal is actually lesser than byproduct in most cases. And depending on the grade quality of the dog food, it could be animals that don't make the human grade category in the first place, right? So I have a blog post. Let me find it. Go to caninecoach.dog blog. No, I take that back. It's Canine Coach, Well-Fed Canine. Here's the link, caninecoach.dog, Well-Fed Canine. And we are looking for the article that says read the dog food label. So when we look at meat meal, it is a generic term, and in some of our lower quality foods could actually be animal parts that they have found elsewhere. It was not high quality meat. It may have just been deceased animals, right? They weren't predefined to make dog food, but it just could be animal parts that died naturally or elsewhere or by other means and added into your dog's food. Friends, I don't want to do that. Don't want to do it. Okay? And we don't know exactly what it is, except in the case they've called it pork. So we know in that case it's coming from pork. It's probably not horse meat or zebra meat, right? But it is still not necessarily the best quality of food, okay? So let's go back. When we have a meat meal or a byproduct, we often find that to be very high in protein, right? So you can get protein sources out of the pieces and parts, and it actually be a big percentage of your protein source and not at all be muscle meat, okay? Not at all be the true muscle meat that we think when we are giving our dog beef or pork, it's this healthy piece of meat. It's everything else. It's all the other stuff, okay? We also see here liver. So organ meat in a recipe is a good thing. Your dogs need to eat organ meat. Organ meat, by definition, is a very high source of protein also, right? It is a high protein ingredient. You may see heart. That is going to lean more into the muscle meats than into the organ meats. But we also see, obviously, different types of liver. You may see in some recipes, especially if you're doing a prepared food, your own prepared or pre-model, where they're getting kidney and pancreas and trachea and intestines. You may see tripe and things of that nature, right? So that's where we're falling into the category of this combination of protein sources and into this organ meat category. We typically do not want our liver ingredients to be more than about 5% of the total recipe. Our organ meats, our organ total should be somewhere around 10%, of which no more than 5% is liver. So you may find some recipes giving you other organ meat specified as ingredients in the bag. Okay? The other question that I asked you, before I move on to that, we also see cheese and lamb. Lamb is obviously not going to be a whole lot of the percentage here because we're getting pretty low into the ingredient list. Now, I know you see a lot of lines left over, but I will come to that in a minute. But we have this combination now of a neutral protein, beef, pork, which is either going to be a little more neutral, maybe cooling, and then lamb, which is a hotter protein. So no matter how you slice it, we got a lot of red meat going into this body all day, every day. And one of the things that I like about a fresh food is I get to vary those proteins on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a periodic basis, and allow the body not to take in all of that at the same time. If I am trying to identify a behavioral issue in a dog, an allergic issue in a dog, inflammation, where is it triggered? I don't want a combination of blended meat categories, right? I'm looking for one and we control it. And the other benefit of having a fresh diet is I can do muscle meat for a few days a week, and then I can do a fish day and really focus on my omega and some lean meat, which gives the digestive system time off the clock from processing all that rich red meat. And then I can do a day of dairy, which again helps the digestive system not have to process all that rich red meat every single day. So that's healthy for the digestive system to get those varieties and variances in a rotational basis. Okay? I asked you how many carbohydrate resources do you see or ingredients do you see? Well, peas, lentils, chickpeas, we already talked about that going into your protein, but it's also part of your carbohydrates, right? Also going to be part of the carbohydrate count. We'll then move into this pea flour category. Brewer's dried yeast is not going to be so much. I mean, this is going to be a tiny amount, and it has some valid benefits to it, but you're going to be getting most of your carbohydrates in these areas, right? So again, remember what I'm telling you. We see two categories of protein, one of which typically in and of itself translates to higher protein ounce for ounce. Meat meal counts higher in protein ounce for ounce than lean meat would. And then we've got all of these. So we've got 4 categories of protein carbohydrate right in a row before we start breaking them out again. So this is an important thing to understand. So how many do we see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5, 6, 7, at least 7 categories of carbohydrate to some degree. Carrots, good thing, right? Though they can be very high in sugar. You may see that as a sweet potato in some of your recipes. That's a good carbohydrate. What we don't want to see is a lot of rice, a lot of quinoa, a lot of other grains. Certainly don't want to see corn and things of that nature. Lettuce, not going to give us a whole lot of nutrient. Might give us some moisture, might give us some fiber, right? Might give us a little bit of fiber in these areas. Celery is a cooling food, so that's a good thing, but you can see where we now have a mix and a blend of all this stuff. So remember I said you see a whole lot of ingredients listed, a whole lot of rows, but salt is an important factor to think about. When we have minimum requirements or standards or guidelines from some of these oversight bodies like AFCO, they tell us that we can't have more than 1% salt in the recipe. 1%. So if things are listed in order as to their total percentage of the recipe, everything that comes after salt is by definition less than 1%. Okay? Of course, we're getting into the vitamins, minerals, all of that, but this is often where we see things like blueberries and some apples, maybe some other fruits or different combinations of foods might show up after your salt. When that happens, I say that they waved a blueberry at the bag and then marketed us to think that there's a lot of that in there. So a blueberry would be good. We don't see any here, but we like those antioxidant properties. But when you see them so low on the bag, so don't count the lines and go, oh, it's the last one. It might be in the middle and you're thinking, oh, that's a fair amount. Where did it come after salt? That's an important thing for you to think about, okay? Other things that we have to think about looking at this food is look at all of these ingredients that are supplements, vitamins, minerals. Taurine is an amino acid. We'll come back to that in a second. But all of this got added because it was cooked out of the original food. So they had to add these things back. In some of our mid to low grade kibbles, all of that might be synthetic, meaning your dog is not likely to absorb it properly and you'll see a lot of it get basically peed out. You know what it's like when you start taking a vitamin mineral supplement of your own and suddenly everything's bright yellow. That was unabsorbed vitamins and minerals. Your body didn't take them in. And so we can have that as an issue when we're using non-whole food sources. Sometimes we still need to add a good digestive enzyme and a good vitamin mineral supplement from whole food sources. And I recommend that to all my kibble feeders. But you got to think about that, and you really need to ask the questions. From where are these coming? And in this case, it makes me think that they're added in as a supplemental form, not necessarily from a whole food source, but a lab-created version, right? I mentioned the taurine. If you've not yet watched the video or podcast that Dr. Barb Fox did with me, go do so. Taurine is an amino acid that has been at the forefront of discussions for dogs with dilated cardiomyopathy and for grain-free diets. There's big hubbub been going on for a couple of years that grain-free diets were leading to heart health issues in dogs. There was a study done on golden retrievers, and veterinarians really started to put the kibosh on fresh, raw, or homemade real food diets, especially those that were grain-free and grain-free kibbles even, right? Saying, oh, we got to go back to the days of grain diets because, oh my God, this heart health issue. Friends, taurine is found in meat, dairy, and shellfish, right? So if we're feeding a fresh diet, your dog is naturally getting the taurine that they need. If I had a dog predisposed to heart health issues or dilated cardiomyopathy, as the Great Danes and Dobies and Goldens may be, then we do some added things to help support them. But it is not a return to a grain-based diet, nor is it a return to a synthetic supplement. Okay? Important things to understand. So, I've already lost count. I remember there were 9 sources of protein, and I think there were 5 or 6 sources of plant-based or other types of carbohydrates. And those are important factors for you to think about. When we are doing a homemade diet or one of the diets like Volhard, for example, we're much higher in the protein and much lower in the carbohydrate. And I have a guide that I can discuss. I am not sharing it because I think it requires a discussion. It requires figuring out what's best for the individual animal, not just sort of this broad sweeping, hey, try this and hope for the best. That's not my style. So, read your bags. Pull up this How to Read a Dog Food label and literally walk through your list of ingredients and find each of these categories on your bag or on your can. If you were feeding canned dog food, hate to burst your bubble a little bit, but it really is just a moist food. It may be what they call as fed, higher in protein, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you're not necessarily getting better ingredients. Okay, not necessarily getting better ingredients. Moisture is a good thing. It helps the body begin the digestive process without this thing called organ robbing. You will see a blog post also out there that talks about add water to your kibble bowl and what that organ robbing topic is really about. So walk through this, look for these things and see if you can identify what is actually in your bag of food and the quality of those ingredients, and make some decisions about, is this truly the best food for your dog as an individual and in general. We know that moving dogs to fresh diets is a healthier option. We can help you do that. It doesn't have to be this break the bank thing. It can be certainly very healthy, very beneficial to health, longevity, and behavior. It can be an offset of cost in many other ways that then makes the value of your new diet seem certainly much more affordable and much more effective. So these are all things that we can discuss as you need to in a consultation. And again, I need to look at the individual animal to really give some specific guidance. So I hope this is helpful to you. I hope this has been beneficial. We'll keep doing more discussions and questions. I'd love to see them. And let's keep our dogs healthy. That's my goal. We keep working on what I like to call thriving dogs. So have a great day. Talk to you soon. Are you joking? Again?